Good evening, members, officers and members of the public. Can I welcome you to this planning meeting of the 16th of November, jumping me gun there, 2022. As always, housekeeping, and I know our members are used to this, but general public are here as well, so I have to read this out. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, and they are opposite the lift if you use the lifts when you came in tonight, either through the security door, which is to my right, to your left, and of course do not use the lifts opposite the stairway. Assemble in Hawley Square opposite the offices, and if it's safe to come back in, an officer will say so and bring you back. Is there anybody intends filming this meeting tonight? No, thank you very much. The use of mobile phones, I would ask that everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst the meeting is in progress. Members requesting to speak under Council Procedure 20.1 have Councillor Pugh under item 4A. Public speaking, again under agenda item 4A, Mr. Tony Michael is here, thank you. Also item 4B, Mr. Phil Castle. Mr. Castle, you there? Yes, sorry, thank you very much. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Keane, substituted this evening by Councillor Curry. Also, Councillor Shrub. No, I don't think he has a substitute in tonight. No, okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, are there any declarations of interest? Thank you, members. Agenda item 3, minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 17th, I think, September. Yeah, oh, it's all right. So I'm only reading what I've got down here, but it was the September meeting. Would members agree? No, 19th of October. Sorry, yes, we're moving on. Yep, 19th of October. I'm looking at two columns here, so. That's why I reprinted it. Thank you. I can't blame you tonight, Stephen. Minutes of the meeting of the 19th of October 2022. Could I have a proposal that those minutes are correct, please? Several hands going up, thank you. Councillor Paul Moore, seconder please. Councillor Crittenden, thank you. All agree? Thank you, members.
On the minutes it says there 19th of November rather than October.
No, you really lost me there, Councillor Hart.
It said minutes of the previous meeting, it says
I assume he's referring to his agenda.
I think, yes, I think you're looking at your agenda, which I haven't got I've got my notes here. Okay, but it would be October, the minutes of October. Yep. Thank you. Agenda item 4, the schedule of planning items this evening. If there are any site visits, they will be on the 2nd of December, which is a Friday, normally 9:30. I'm going to pass now to Mr. Livingston, Planning Applications Manager, for a point of information regarding item 4A. Thank you. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. On item 4A, which is the application for Reclamat, I just wanted to correct an error in the report on page 12, which refers in the other matters section. It states, whilst the site may be under investigation by the Environment Agency, this is a separate matter to the planning application. So the Planning Department doesn't have any evidence that the Environment Agency are investigating. This was a reference to the separate comments of environmental protection within the council, which you'll see within the comments. But the primary point that's raised in that is that anything under other legislation is entirely separate from the considerations in the planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. So moving on again to item 4A, application for approval, which is Reclamat Limited, Woodchurch Road, Birchington. I have the ward councillor Okay, I will go back on that again. We have the applicant with us this evening. I'll come to Councillor Pugh in a moment. The off person is Mr. Tony Michael, if that's the correct name. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for your time this evening. The officers have explained the merits of this application very well in their report. I only wish to remind that this is a variation application and that stacking of cars is already permitted to 4 metres and has taken place for 12 years or so. We only seek another 1.5 metres to stack vehicles to 5.5 metres. And this is the smaller part of the overall site. The rest of the site, which is far larger, cars are stacked up to 7 metres and have been so for the last 20 years at least. This is an existing use and situation, therefore, and established for many years. And there is an existing mature established tree screening which will be enhancing under condition as agreed with the officers. Reclamet are a responsible company and carry out a necessary role in the community and have been successfully trading since 1991. Prior to this, the site was Burke's Scrapyard, established in 1960. So this is 60 years of such use as a scrap and recycling facility. Reclamet employs 50 or so key workers that are all local people. They have the KCC abandoned vehicle contract and the KCC contract to process their metal waste. They are contracted to Kent Police via the AA to collect damaged vehicles. They are contracted to the Border Force to process their seized concealment vehicles, so they are not reused, and they supply vehicles to the Border Force for concealment training. They are contracted to Kent Fire Brigade to provide vehicles for road traffic accident training, where they practice cutting off roofs to free trapped passengers in cars. They work for Direct Line Group, AA Insurance, Tesco Underwriting, plus 12 other insurers, and are part of a collection network for accident-damaged cars in Kent, Sussex and South East London. They are audited and accredited members of the Vehicle Recycling Association, the UK governing body which accredits reputable vehicle dismantlers as opposed to disreputable ones who steal and sell parts of recovered cars. They assist KCC with roadblocks to help stop unlicensed scrap dealers and fly tippers. Additionally, Reclamet like to try and give back to their community. They donate cars to Broadstairs College for automotive repair courses to teach students on. They have donated many 4x4 vehicles to the Ukraine in the war against Russia. They recently transported a fire engine from the Spitfire Memorial to Duxford Air Museum free of charge. They provided lifting services on a Harrier aircraft for the Service Personnel and Veterans Agency. This is a government war veteran support agency, free of charge. They have donated over £9,000 to the Rainbow Foundation, a charity that helps older people to regain mental health and well-being. They paid for a helicopter to fly veterans to the Battles for Victory show at Quecks Park this year. Reclamet takes its role in the community seriously and generously, and it does not cut corners with that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Speaking under Council Procedure 20.1, raising points of concern, Ward Councillor, Councillor Pugh. Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to speak. I called in this application because I am concerned about the proposed heights for the stacking of vehicles in these cars. I appreciate that Reclamet have operated and have stacked cars to this height for a number of years. Now, that doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, mean that that is appropriate nor right. I've been concerned particularly about the Reclamet site for a while, mainly from concerned residents, but that is a separate matter to this application. Now, I'm not here to argue that Reclamet shouldn't be operating. You've heard from the applicant or somebody speaking on behalf of the applicant that they're a very established business and they have been there for a number of years. I'm not here to dispute that. What I am here to dispute is that I don't necessarily think that, particularly in this current climate, when we're talking about the environment and landscape and views, is it appropriate for any business to be able to stack materials to that height, particularly where it is actually located in a very open space. Now, you know, the Reclamet site itself is situated partly on a bit of a slope. I've seen the stacking of the cars from some distance. They're noticeable from Manston Road quite considerably. You can see them from quite far away, particularly as you drive along the road. But I've visited the owners of Nelson Park Riding Centre, who are situated behind the Wreck Limit site, away from Manston Road. And even with the position of the Wreck Limit site being lower down the slope, the stacking of the cars is quite considerable, what it is already. Now, there has been mention of, and there may be within this this condition, these recommendations for approval, that there will be installing of appropriate screening. Now, what I would urge the committee is, if you are minded to potentially approve this application, is for you to go and have a site visit and take a look for yourselves. I'm sure the owners of Nelson Park Riding Centre would be happy for members of the committee to visit and look from their angle, because from what I see, you know, the amount of screening is minimal around the site. Now, there was some, I understand, quite some years ago, but over the years they have been destroyed, or I've been told that there was a fire at one point. I'm not disputing that, I'm not entirely sure. But my point is that there is minimal screening around the site, and even if some trees were to be planted, you would be able to see, particularly from Nelson Park Riding Centre, that, you know, there is a lack of screening. Even if some screening was planted, it wouldn't really particularly go in the way of screening effectively stacked vehicles to this height. I do think it is a problem. Again, as I said, I'm not here to dispute Wreck Limit's right to operate, particularly in this site, but I think the impact on the landscape and the surrounding area needs to be borne quite considerable weight. And from my perspective, and from what I've seen of the site, there is already a considerable amount of cars stacking on that site. And I don't really think it's appropriate to increase that and make that worse. But thank you for your time, members, and I hope that you will either refuse permission for this application or you will agree to a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pugh. I will ask now Annabel Hemmings, the Planning Officer, to outline her report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the application site, as usual, outlined in red in this location here. The blue outline site, which is this office site here, and the wider site is the Wreck Limit site, and the Nelson Park Riding Centre is in this location here. And as has been mentioned, planning consent is sought to increase the height that vehicles can be stacked in this red lines area up to a height of 5.5 metres. So this is an aerial view of the site. So the application site is this bit here, and you can see the Nelson Park Riding Centre, which has been made reference to in this location. We have Woodchurch Road here and St Margaret's Road in this location. Just some photographs of the site. So this is within the site, so you can see the cars stacked at one above each other. So with two cars stacked, that's actually 4 metres in height. So another view, again, you can see the cars are stacked, the forklifts that operate in this part of the site, and the vehicle stacking frames without cars obviously on them. So from the planning history set out in the report, members will have noted that in 2010, permission was allowed for vehicles to be stacked to a maximum height of 4 metres, and that was, as we said, 2 cars high equivalent in the location that we're looking at. And this application, as I say, seeks to increase it to 5.5 metres, which is equivalent to 3 vehicles stacked above each other. When this application was originally submitted, it was seeking consent for maximum height of vehicle storage for 7 metres in height, which would be equivalent to essentially 4 vehicles being stacked upon it on top of each other. Officers raised concerns about the potential issues, particularly a visual impact of those vehicles at that height being stacked. And so the application has now been amended to the maximum height of 5.5 metres, and additional landscape proposed to site boundaries. So this is actually a view standing and looking back at the site from Woodchurch Road. That is the office building that we saw on the location plans. And you can see there is some planting here. And if we look at another photograph further back, you can see there are trees along the boundaries. There are some difference in heights of that planting, and as you can see here, sorry, let me move my mouse, there is some gaps where you can see cars and vehicles stacked, but essentially along the boundaries there is some landscaping. Excuse me. So, as we've seen, there are some gaps, and the applicants are proposing, as I say, to increase landscaping along these boundaries here, particularly to fill in the gaps and essentially to provide planting of mature conifers, so evergreen planting, and there is a condition on the application to secure further details of that planting to ensure that it will be evergreen and it will be of a particular size to secure mitigation as a temporary, almost immediately. Essentially, it may not be to the full height of 7 metres, which is what the applicant seeks to achieve in the long term, but there would be temporary mitigation with the planting coming in at fairly mature levels. So with the reduction of height from the 7 metres, so the 4-car high, to 5.5 metres, so equivalent to 3 cars high, and the fact that vehicles can be parked and are being stacked in this area hatched here up to 7 metres in height. So that is in between the application site, which is here, and the Nelson Park Riding School and other properties in this location. And the additional planting that's being proposed, officers are satisfied that the application could go ahead with minimal impact on the visual impact of the local area. So the officer recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Annabel. I move that the officer's recommendation, as you've heard, is for approval. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members? Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the officer, please, just to confirm that the riding stables, where they're facing the site, as I'm looking at that from the north east, that there are cars up to 7 metres in height in where you've got the red lines hatching?
There is, they have been parking cars in that. I haven't been on site personally to see if they are there.
Right, so what I was trying to establish is that the existing application which they've got consent to put things up to 7 metres in height, and therefore the complainant is already looking at those at 7 metres?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay. In that case, Chair, I can see no problem with this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. Do I have any other members wish? Councillor Wing.
A similar question to Councillor Alban. Thank you, Chair. On that side of Nelson Park where the riding stables are, is there existing screening of trees there? And is that adequate? Do you feel that's adequate to screen the present height?
I think there's sporadic landscaping, but it's simply not a consideration for this application because we're looking at the variation of the 2010, which is only the area to the south of the Reclamate site. If you can go back to
I
the
understand that, but the complaint has come from that side, so it might just be that that Reclaim Act will not only shield this side, but also make some efforts to shield the other side to smooth the way. Like Councillor Alban, I can't really see an issue. There are some gaps in the screening, but as long as that happens, I can't see this being a particular problem. I'd be more worried if it was slap bang in the middle of a residential area.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wing. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm like-minded with my colleague, Councillor Pugh, because this is in my ward, and it is quite a visual impact as you go down the Manston Road. And I think if we start getting them higher and higher, I think it's just going to destroy the view of the countryside, really. And I think, you know, they're high enough as they are. I don't necessarily see the need to just go up to that height. I think it's just... if they have an issue, don't stack them so high. You know, don't have such a gap between the cars. I mean, you know, just reduce it that way rather than having a gap between. I mean, if you're going to stack a third car on top, my car's more than 1.5 metres tall. So I can't quite see how stacking 3 high is going to be 1.5 metres. Is part of my question. And secondly, I just think it is a visual impact, and I think that's just going to ruin the look. And I think that's a shame, really. Because if you look from Manson, all you see is cars. And get it even higher, it's just such a height. It's as high as a house.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hart. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I do agree with Councillor Hart. I appreciate that Reclamet is a very good business, but it by nature of the business itself is going to be a little bit of an eyesore and rather noisy. I do think for the benefit of those around and for the visual impact, it would be better to keep it at the 4 metres. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Well, of course, for the benefit of the visual impact, it'd be better if it wasn't there at all, but we have to consider the thing in the round. I think we'd be laughed at, frankly, if we rejected this application, because there's absolutely no chance that we'd be successful in defending an appeal, and I should be voting to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Orban, bring you back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You know, I'm an old stager like yourself, and I used to use Berkey's Yard many, many years ago.
Are you talking to me, Councillor Orban?
I'm speaking on your behalf, Chair. You know, it's always been there. You could always see it. It's been there. It's there. The point is, the complaint from the complainant is already looking at 7-metre high vehicles. So their complaint that this is going to make it even worse is wrong, because it's only going to 5 metres. So, you know, she can't see that. She can't see this part. Anyway, that's my... Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we're only looking at the point of view of the riding school. I thought from my point of view, it's for the whole visual impact of everybody. I do think that 3 cars stacked high is not a pleasant sight. I don't think the riding school really, they may have complained, but I don't think we should only be looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rezesi.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Orban on this. That in fact, whilst you've got them going up as high as 7 metres and to that height of on the other side, then I don't see an issue on going up just 1.5 metres on that side.
Thank you. Councillor Paulmore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't like to agree with Councillor Everett, obviously, but I do feel that if this did go to appeal, we wouldn't win it. I think they are providing additional screening from the roadside, which is going to enclose that bit. And as we've already said, they're going to 5 metres, not 7 as they already are on one side. So it's going to be obscured by the 7 metres. I think we've just got to protect ourselves as well in wasting things that will get passed through appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask just a clarification on point? 4 metres, is that the top of the car, or is that the racking height, and then you have the car on top? Is that 5.5 metres from the top of the roof to the ground, or is that from the racking point? So effectively, you're going up another 2 metres.
So the way the conditions have been worded, and this is from the 2010 application, subsequently changed, is effectively that the height of the vehicle stored shall not exceed a top height of 5.5 in terms of what's there. So nothing can go over 5.5 within that area, basically.
Thank you. Right, members, I don't see any other hands in the air, so I'm going to put this to the vote, which is for approval. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you, members. That has been carried. Thank you. Councillor Bayford was going to be told off then. Keeping the mic. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, members. Okay, agenda item 4B, which is Miles and Bar, 4345 High Street, Broadstairs. Speaking against the application is Mr. Castle, and I understand Mr. Castle is there. And you have 3 minutes, Mr. Castle. Thank you.
Two applications were submitted and granted during COVID stay-at-home restrictions, so most people wouldn't see the street notices. Planning confirmed to me in writing we were not informed by letter, unlike our neighbours, so there was no coherent neighbour consultation on the first two applications. I would have supported the first application, but would probably not have supported the second application had I been made aware, and certainly not this retrospective application. NPPF says any changes should be sympathetic to the character and form of the street scene, and was emphasised by a conservation officer in her email of the 28th of July 2022. As an extract here, there was already a sense of disparity of the proportionality of the property. However, given how it has now been constructed, this is considerably more obvious in my opinion, as it has stretched the whole scheme much higher. This has distorted somewhat the entire elevation. I would suggest that further enforcement action is taken and the scheme is implemented correctly. This email should be found in the retrospective application, but it in fact is hidden in or recorded against the second application. As with the lack of any photos of the site in the three applications, the error of omission is convenient for the developer as it doesn't give a full and true picture. Photo 7 that I actually provided earlier on this afternoon shows the sense of overlooking and the enforced subservience of the church tower from my home. Paragraph 130 of the NPPF states decisions should ensure that developments are visually attractive as a result of good architecture, sympathetic to the local character and history. Policy SP 35 relates to the quality and development and states that new development will be required to be of high quality and inclusive design. Policy QDO2, being the primary planning aim, is to promote or reinforce the local character of the area and must be designed as an integral part of new development proposals and coordinated with adjacent sites. Photos 2 and 3 I supplied show the roof lines of properties going down the High Street, included in the former NatWest Bank and the Kent School of English, and also the roof line in Queen's Road. All stepped down, and this building did, even with the first two grants of permission, but the retrospective application does not. The church tower has become a subservient to the development. It would not have been to the initial application or as badly to the second. See photos 1, 4 and 6. NPPF policy section 16 paragraph 197 states in determining applications local planning authorities should take account of the desirability of new development making a positive contribution to local character and distinctiveness. The buildings are not listed nor in the conservation area, but both could be considered undesignated heritage assets due to their prominence at the corner of the High Street and in Queen's Road. Policy HE03 details that proposals that affect non-designated heritage assets will be assessed by reference to the scale of harm, both direct and indirect, or to loss of significance of the heritage asset. As the Conservation Officer said in their email, enforcement is needed. Enforcement and implementation of the second granted application should be the minimum action taken by TDC. Morally, it should be to the first grant implemented, but with no appeals process available, I believe once planning is granted, even with a judicial review, unless evidence of fraud or bribery could be proven, rather than failure of due process due to COVID restrictions, which I believe is the case here, the second grant will stand and should be enforced.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castle. Thank you. Gave you a little bit of extra time there. Moving to Annabelle once again to give her report on this application. Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the application site outlined in red. So we have the High Street running across the slide here, and this is Queen's Road running downwards. This is zooming in, so again we have the High Street here, Queen's Road, and this is the part of the site we're actually going to be looking at in detail. So this is a view of the site as it was from, obviously from Google, before the development took place. So you can see it did step down here in this location. This is a clearer image of it. So you've got the High Street there, it steps down, and then you've got a single-storey element at that point here, and we have the church tower on the right. So this is in 2020, planning permission for a first floor extension above that single-storey element we saw a moment ago was granted, and the conversion of this part of the building was allowed for to residential. And in 2021, it was granted for a second floor extension for an additional flat. This was what was actually approved in 2021. Sorry, and this is, sorry, that's the elevation that was approved in 2020. Sorry, apologies, members. So you can see the first floor extension there. That was what was actually approved in the 2021 application. So that's the second floor element there. This is what has actually been built. So you can see it is actually flush with the adjoining part of the building there. And so that's the elevation as it's been built. This is what is now being proposed to members. That it's adding actual detailing to the elevation to make it more sympathetic and to blend it in and tie it into the existing building. So I will go through some more detailing about what's being proposed as we go further on. But they are, as you can see, they are not proposing to lower the height of the building. It is detailing to it. So this is just a view of it as it's been built out. You can still see the tower of the church and the separation that does exist between the two. Just looking, that's the side elevation that was approved. This is the side elevation as built. And this is the rear elevation as approved and as built. As you can see in both those scenarios, obviously it increases in height, but it is essentially very similar to what's being built apart from the front elevation. But going back to the front elevation, as has been said, the applicants are now looking to make detailed changes to this elevation to tie it in and bring it some context to the surrounding development and break up the mass of brickwork. So things like the string courses are being put in, so they'll be rendered and match as far as possible, although there'll be some discrepancies in height, but it will tie in with the detailing on the existing building. There will also be window detailing, so lintels will be added, and sill detailing added as well, which would match those on the existing building. And it really just seeks to try and bring it together as a whole. And essentially, officers feel that these enhancements will actually tie that building and bring it into a visually attractive manner that does tie it into the surrounding area. And as it has been mentioned, they are not listed buildings and they're not within the conservation area. And whilst it is disappointing that the approved development wasn't built out as it should have been, it is considered these works are sufficient to overcome officers' concerns. So the officer recommendation at this time is to defer and delegate because we are awaiting the payment of the required SAM contribution for the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anna. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. To the Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members. Councillor Orban. I beg your pardon, Councillor Bulmore. Beg your pardon, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Thank you, Chair. Chair, at what point does the case officer not realise that this building is built beyond what has been passed? Would be my first question. How have we allowed it to get to that stage? Why was it not stopped? Because planning was only for a certain height and now we've built this building in line with everything else. And quite frankly, if we say, oh, well, it's a shame they've done it, but if they make it look a bit prettier, we'll accept it, does that not set a precedence for everyone else to think they can do the same? This is totally unacceptable. And I think that the building firm that done it, if they can't read plans properly and measure correctly, that's their fault. And the owner, knowing full well that it wasn't to go to the full light, has chanced his arm and created this monstrosity. It impacts on the street scene. Yes, it's not conservation, I appreciate that, but it impacts on the street scene. It looks hideous, and I will not be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to say the photo that was shown is that's, if you can go back to the photo, please. Yeah, obviously that is not what they want to do. They want to add to that. I mean, as looking at that, it's pretty brutal as far as I can see. The previously approved application fitted in there very well, looked very good, and I thought that was an excellent approved application. Whatever the owner of the property has decided to do that, God only knows. I think what's disappointing, if we can go back to the last plan that you had up, please, last elevation you had up. Thank you. Obviously, I'm taking what looks like a lintel going across the whole of the first floor top windows there. If that was raised up, it's obviously because that was the roof, that was the height of the previous roof, I take it to be. I actually go along with Councillor Moore, as though I don't really go along with him much, but I'll just get my own back for my colleague. We can't, you know, basically to answer Councillor Moore's point, you know, every application is dealt with on its merit and it doesn't set a precedent per se. Of course, other people might decide, oh, they've done it and I'll get away with it. But all applications are different. But I actually think it does look a bit brutal on the street scene, and for me, I can't support this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Before I come into Councillor Everett, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on the point with regards to, you know, discovery of the fact that they've built the eaves height. Obviously, it's the main thing that the roof doesn't step down. The eaves height is not lower, as obviously designed. Fundamentally, it's all about when we find out, which is when the scaffolding comes down and we get the complaint in. You know, that's when it's investigated. Obviously, in terms of stopping it, obviously when the scaffolding comes down is when the first time you see it. In terms of a stop notice, we wouldn't be able to serve a stop notice on this. It's not a listed building. We'd be liable for compensation. It's just not. It's not the way, unfortunately, the planning enforcement system's set up. But I absolutely agree with the sentiments here. What obviously we have looked at is the proposal has been put in on the basis of what's been built. We made it clear at the enforcement stage that that wasn't going to be acceptable because, as you've seen the photo, I mean, yeah, I don't need to really elaborate on that. What's been proposed, obviously, is to alter the design around the windows and adding the string coursing in to try and soften what you'd refer to as the solid to void ratio, to try and soften the brickwork. But the fundamental question is not so much about, I suppose, the features on there, is the drop of the eaves height so fundamental that it now means that the proposal is unacceptable? And that has to then take account of the other elements that they're putting in to try and alleviate the amount of brickwork. So that's the main question for members is, does the fact that the eaves does not drop down now make it unacceptable? And again, as has already been outlined, it is, as Councillor Orban said, on the merits of this proposal, irrelevant that it's there. Obviously you can see it, so that helps, but the judgment is it acceptable or not, even though it's there?
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Everett.
Let me answer your question then, Mr Livingston. It's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. I was quite shocked by that photograph, actually. I think it's quite stark. And whilst I recognise that some mitigation is proposed, I don't think it's sufficient to to mitigate the effect of that building being built to the same height as the adjacent part of the building. So clearly we're not here to punish people for breaching, for going outside the permission that's granted. That's not our job as a committee. But equally, we're not here to be sympathetic to them, because if we don't accept what they now propose, it might cost them money to take it down. That's their problem. They built it. My feeling is that that is significant enough for us to refuse this application, and I think the impact on the street scene and the setting of the church is sufficient to justify a refusal, and I shall vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit miffed as to how they think that balances up to what was in the original plan. I mean, to my mind, Pat over there knows how I feel about retrospective applications and when builders get it wrong. But to say that this is an acceptable compromise, if the windows were like for the existing one, and maybe with the other windows around the side to break up the starkness, but I agree with everybody else that in its present form it's not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you. There were two images that I would actually quite like to see again. One is of the street scene with the building and the church, and the diagrams of the original plans that were proposed. Yeah, I think that was it. I do think that the proposed amendment, artistic interpretation is a matter of opinion, but I actually think it looks even more of a pig's ear than it does now, if I'm allowed to use such a phrase. It has become very dominating and very brutal, and so I'm just wondering, can I also have a look at the original?
Yeah, also that photo you looked at, or image you looked at, the windows are the same height, and then
Yeah, it's all higgledy-piggledy. I guess that's not going to be corrected, but...
That the plan you wanted? That's the approved plan.
I mean, even that's fairly brutal, but thank you.
better than the other one.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in my view, the way we should be looking at this is, would we have accepted this proposal to start with? And for me, the answer is no. It's stark. It doesn't fit with the street scene. So I personally think that we should refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. At risk of joining a pile-in on this, I would like to use a phrase used by Councillor Everett at the last planning committee meeting when we were talking about the Fairlawns road, and I was a bit reticent of using it myself, but he was correct. They're taking liberties. They haven't. This isn't a mistake. They've done it on purpose. They've thought that they would get one over on us, and I don't think we should. Bearing in mind, and bearing in mind what you said about, looking at this on its own merit, I agree with Councillor Bayford. If that had come before us to consider before they'd built it, then it looks a dog's dinner to me, and I wouldn't have approved that.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I must agree with my fellow colleagues here. At least with the first one where the roof dropped, that banding went all the way round. And as it is now, that you have that drop in that banding that goes around the middle. It makes it look even worse. I am in agreement with all of them. I think that this is a liberty that's been taken by the builder, assuming that we would just agree retrospectively the permission. We wouldn't have agreed this in the first place. It looked better with a drop roof. And unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, it should look like the original plans, and that's it. And because even with that banding like that, it just looks odd, absolutely odd. But when the roof was dropped, it went all the way round and looked sympathetic. But as it is, it just looks really awful, really awful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wing.
I think it's going here, and because I was very confused about what they'd actually been given permission for, because we seem to move away from the fact that they've almost added a height to sort of concentrating on the little knickknacks that they've slapped on the front of the property in the hope we won't notice. And I think they've done that badly. It's almost like, you know, having a football team and we've got one player with the wrong colour shirt and the wrong colour socks on in the hope we won't notice. But it just sticks out. And I think, well, I think the very nature that it stepped down sort of kept some of the historical element of the street while also provided the developer with the means to slightly develop the property. And we're not looking at some individual person who might have got this wrong. This is Miles and Barr. They clearly understand planning processes. So I'm agreed that, you know, this we wouldn't approve because it just looks hideous, even with the little knickknacks on the front. And we would have approved the other one, which would have stayed in keeping with some of the heritage of the street, a street which is a very prominent street in Broadstairs. So I'm going to vote against, I'm afraid.
Thank Councillor Wing. No, Mr Castle, I'm afraid you can't. Rules don't allow, once you've spoken, I can't, please, I can't allow you to, if you don't mind. Thank you. Mr Livingston.
So I just want to come back on something Councillor Wing said. The applicant isn't Miles and Barr. The building is the Miles and Barr building. It's the former Spicer McCall building as well. Just to confirm, the applicant isn't Miles and Barr.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other speakers, so I'm going to put this to you, members, which is to defer and delegate for approval. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Right, that proposal has been lost. So if I hand over to Mr Livingston.
Thank you, Chair. So just to run through, I've obviously been listening to the debate and obviously been putting something together with regards to the points that members have raised. And in terms of looking to refuse the application, there are two reasons. One is the primary reason of the design, which I'll go through in a second. The second is a technical reason. Obviously, the reason it's deferred is to make sure a contribution is secured because it's additional residential accommodation, which needs mitigation to avoid impact on the special protection area. So there would be a technical reason for refusal, which relates to the fact that the mitigation has not been secured. But the primary reason would be, I think that the proposed development, by virtue of its height, design and relationship with the adjacent church, would appear cramped, contrived and incongruous within the street scene, failing to respect and enhance the character of the area, contrary to Thanet Local Plan Policy, QDO2, Broadstairs and St Peter's Neighbourhood Plan Policy, BSP 9, and paragraphs 130 and 135 of the MPPF. And that would be my recommendation if a member wanted to move that.
Thank you. Before I do that, Councillor Orban, Councillor Patmore, did you vote on that item because our clerk didn't see you, just for the record?
No, I'm sorry, I was voting
against. Thank you for that, just for the record. Right, thank you. Councillor Orban.
Exactly what Mr Livingstone said. I'll propose that, Chair. I couldn't remember all of the wording on that, but I'll propose that, Chair.
I'll bring back Ian in just the same
So
as me.
just to confirm, it's two reasons. I outlined the design reason in terms of the impact on the character of the area, but it's also the SAM reason as well.
Thank you. So I need a seconder for that. And do you all agree?
Agree, Chair.
Any against? No, that's fine. Thank you. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. That, members, brings us to a close. I'm going to ask Stephen to cut us off because we've been live, but you're not going to get away as easy as that tonight because Ian wants to have a quick word. Thank you. It could be a Christmas tree.
So it's just to confirm, obviously, this agenda was slightly smaller than we were anticipating. Obviously, we do look to try and make sure the planning committee agenda has sort of about 5 items on to try and get through the amount that we've got going to committee. But